The same thing when I hear people talking about the success and oh, once I get there, then I'm gonna be the person who I'm gonna be. No, you are becoming the person right now. That little moment of success is not gonna make you who you are, but the entire journey up to that moment, that's gonna make you who you are.
We are heroes and dreamers. We are restless believers.
I'm so happy and grateful to have such an inspiring, smart, intelligent guest on the show today. Benny, thank you so much for being here and welcome to my podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Anna, and I'm looking forward to this conversation as well, and to learn as much from you, and hopefully I can inspire and share some of my experiences to your audience as well.
For sure, because today we'll talk about a topic we've never talked in this podcast before. But before we do so, do you want to share a little bit about you, who you are, what you've been like, your journey so far? And then we dive deep into the topic of Stoicism.
Yeah, and thanks for for that opportunity, and I love that topic. It's something part of me, but I also wanted at the beginning, this is also kind of an inspiration for people to find their own philosophy of life. But we'll get into that a little bit more. So my name is Benny. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm from a very small little town. I probably won't. I was surprised Google Maps found it, but and then I studied tourism, and I moved to Spain at one point in 2010. The years is just a bit mixed, but I moved to Spain and I lived in the south of Spain, Granada, Malaga, and Cadiz for about 7 years. I managed to speak a little bit of Spanish. I'm okay, I guess. And I met my now ex there, and she was from Morocco, so we did a lot of traveling to Morocco, the Netherlands. I started my own language school. I went there as an English teacher, so I started my own language school at the end. But at one point we figured, we need to move a little bit to another place. So we moved to Dubai, where I was teaching, and at the end I was writing the exams, which was a great journey. But so I always moved around a little bit. As I said, I studied tourism, so I did my internship in Asia. I never felt like I was, at one place where I felt like I was home. So, and then after I quit my job in Dubai, I sold everything. And now I'm at the moment I'm in Chile with everything that I own is in my backpack and in a small rucksack, and I'm watching the houses for people who go on a trip and taking care of their pets, and I'm just seeing where life takes me. And at the same time I'm building this life coaching coaching business, life coaching, sober coaching, just kind of helping people who are going through some of the struggles that I went through, and basing that on philosophy in my case, as you mentioned, Stoicism. So I'm looking forward to talking more about that, just in general.
Living life to the fullest. Amazing. Like truly very, very inspiring. And I would like to talk also about like that part of your journey a little bit of selling everything and so on. But let's first talk about your huge passion of the philosophy of Stoicism. So for everybody who's not familiar with that concept or philosophy yet, would you explain what it is? And then how can Stoicism help us to live a more peaceful and purposeful life?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and I think that's also part of my mission. And again, I'm not here to turn anyone to Stoics. I'm more like trying to promote the idea of having a philosophy of life, because I think that is key in living the best life according to your values. But yeah, and Stoicism is a Greek philosophy, from the Hellenistic days that dates like almost 2,500 years ago, and it came to Rome, and now it's kind of having this uprising again. But there's this misconception about it, and it's to be the stiff upper lip and putting all your emotions aside. But that's pretty much not what it is. If someone tells you about that, and they're talking about the lowercase Stoicism, but there's the uppercase Stoicism that is about really being in touch with yourself. I kind of it's kind of the Western version of Buddhism and Taoism. The interesting thing, I read the Tao Te Ching the other day, and I was like reading it and thinking, this is Stoicism, right? I can just compare this, and I'm actually writing some articles about that, so I'm just like getting my head wrapped around it as well. But basically, what Stoicism is, it's living the good life, right? Living a peaceful life in accordance with nature, based on virtue. And virtue is, the highest moral standards that you can live by, and a kind of life of excellence where you're just making progress all the time. kind of emulating that idea of the sage, the perfect person, which is all the way up there. But we're just trying to get better a little bit every day, and there's many different techniques, many different ways of doing that. But at the core, it's truly about knowing who you are, living in accordance with your nature, the nature in general, being the best version of yourself for the community around you. And that's kind of how I see, in one or two sentences, Stoicism is, and how it can help you as well. But there are many more assets and facets, and yeah, I'm as you can see, I'm passionate about this because it really changed my life, and hopefully it can inspire some others as well.
In what way did it shape you and your life?
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, I've been like, I don't know if you're familiar with on X. There's Twitter, there's Spaces. I still keep calling it Twitter sometimes, and we've been hosting like conversations there for like over the last 2 years, like live conversations with people, and we've asked this question to many people, like, what, why do you go into a philosophy? Why do you do this inner work? And a lot of times it comes with people who hit it, right? They get stuck in their lives, or it's just some difficulties they're trying to overcome. And the same with me, having issues with my relationships, some health problems. Work was tough. And a good friend of mine, he pointed me to like reading and books, and I started doing that. And I kind of diagnosed myself with an existential crisis. At one point, there goes the dogs I'm looking after at the moment, and
That's
so
life.
that's life, exactly, and nature. I read this book, and in the book, Stoicism came over, and I started recognizing myself, and I started really seeing like, this is me, right? This is something that I can help me. So I just started reading it, and I started looking at the text, like started reading Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca. Those are the kind of the texts that we have still left, because 99% of the texts are all gone. So I started reading it, and I started recognizing myself, but also I started seeing the practicality of it. And one quote that really changed a lot for me was a quote by Marcus Aurelius, and he said that person is bound to act that way. It's like being upset with a fig tree for secreting juice. And by the way, soon you'll be dead. Soon both you will be dead, right? So kind of putting it all in perspective of life. So the next time I went to work, and my colleague, who was a little bit frustrating, I went to him and was like, I can't change him, but I can change the way I'm going to deal with him. That's what I got from this quote. Why am I going to be upset at this person who's being the way he is, if he's not going to change? But let me try to deal with it in a better way. And after that, I kind of started seeing the humor in it. I was like, yeah, this is him. I started recognizing it, and that really helped me. So I started seeing the practicality of the philosophy, and how it could help me overcome things. And as I start reading more and more, put things into perspective, and yeah, in that sense, help me as a guide. Sometimes we need as a guide to help you get through obstacles, and also have a better view of what you want your life to be.
Beautiful. What are some like core principles or also practices of Stoicism?
Yeah, that's the first thing I think most people will hear about is the dichotomy of control, which is what is in my control and what isn't in my control. And you can see that again coming back in other philosophies as well. But there's the Roman philosopher who, the Stoic philosopher, who was born a slave, and he became the mentor of Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of the Roman Empire back in the day. And one of his students wrote his notes, and he opens with that dichotomy: what is in our control and what isn't. And what is in our control are our internal thoughts, right? Our thoughts, our opinions, but also our actions. And what isn't is everything outside, even my body, but also opinions of others, all the events that's happening around me. I can't control any of it. For example, I can try to be as healthy as I want to be, exercise, eat healthy, do all the good things, but I can still fall ill. I can still get injured. And that's something that isn't out of my control. But what is, how I deal with it. So how do I, whether I'm going to see, and this was something that how I dealt with it, like looking at myself as a victim, like, oh, why me? Why is this happening to me? But kind of that changed my mindset as like, no, this is happening to me because it can't, right? If it happens to someone else, it can happen to me. So why am I so special, right? That shouldn't happen to me. But I can now look at ways to deal with it in a better way. to say, okay, this is the situation. And that's another thing. It's a very mindful philosophy. It's really focused in the now, which again, you can see in a lot of other philosophies, but it's really focused in the now because this is the only moment, again, that we have kind of control over. The past is gone, the future we don't know, but now is when we have to take action. So that's one of the things. And there's also different techniques like negative visualization, where we try to prepare ourselves by looking at what might happen and can I deal with it? So, for example, if you go on a holiday and it starts to rain, just a simple example, you can think of yourself, okay, what would I do then? Would it ruin my holiday, or would I try to make the best of it? Those are different sides of the coin. Then we have, we've got negative visualization, we've got memento mori, remember that you will die, that you will, because I think most people are afraid of death. Well, if you sit with it, and I think death needs a kind of a rebranding. We need to be able to talk about it, need to see what it means to you. Why are you afraid? Because that takes, a lot of the fear out of life. And there's a beautiful quote by Seneca, which I always remember. He says, life, it's because of death that you are so precious in my eyes. Because we need to have that kind of finite moment, right? If we live forever, where's the beauty of it? And then the last one before we continue is like what I like as well, the amor fati, accept your fate, accept what's happening. And I think that's also, again, that mindfulness comes in. Like, I'm just going to accept what happens and then deal with it. And then just make sure that I'm going to take the best action in the moment that I'm going to, that I can with all the tools that I have, because we are more powerful, I think, than we often, think of ourselves. And usually when we have fears or anxieties, but if we come to the now, those are gone, because we just have to put it into practice and see make the best out of it.
Which is so fascinating because literally, I don't know how many hundreds personal development books I read and coaching in my coaching education, and like in many of the YouTube videos and so on, you find exactly those concepts. Like in modern personal development, this is what they're talking about. And what I find so fascinating is basically that you see that we're all human, and even hundreds of years ago, basically they dealt with the same problems and they have the same kind of solutions towards it, that no matter what you're facing in life, and like it definitely looked very, very different like hundreds of years ago than what we're facing today. But if you shift your perspective, that's where your power lies.
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing is, now you have like modern day therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy and some others. They are based on Stoicism. Like we've had an interview and a big author in the Stoic community, Donald Robertson. He was a cognitive behavioral therapist and he wrote some books on it. And we spoke to him a couple of times. And he actually, he made that link. Like they use an Epictetus quote, that former slave, as the basis of CBT, where it's, your thoughts, they can affect your behavior and all that stuff. But those Stoics, those philosophers from Greece and then, Rome, they already knew this, right? Maybe now we have more scientific data to back it up and all of that stuff, but they already knew this, that it's it's up to us to make that change in how we think, and also about how we deal with our emotions, because that's also a big part of how we live. And again, Stoicism often has this view of putting your emotions aside and ignoring them as much as you can, but that wasn't the case, right? It's kind of you have this initial impulse of your emotions. That's something that you can't get rid of because it just happens. But then we have this pause, right? And in this pause, that's where that's where our control comes into place. This happens, okay, let me objectively look at what happens around me. Let me just take a moment and just analyze the situation, because we have reason and logic, right? That's kind of separates us from a lot of the animals. And again, that's also another debate, but we have reason and logic, and we are able to apply that. So some people say, oh, like an example for anger, for example, oh, anger has a use case. Okay, but reason and logic has a use case as well. So I got angry. Let me just analyze why I got angry. And let me just try not to act out of that anger, but I try to act out of reason and logic. So, and by doing so, we get to know so much more about ourselves. What triggers us? What worries us? What do I need to work on? but in the moment we can still try to use the best application to that. And again, as you said, this comes back in so many modern texts. And I like, the Mark Manson from the book, and I always forget the title, this
The subtle art of not giving a fuck.
yeah, exactly, that one. And he said at one video, he said, all of these books kind of say the same, and they're all kind of, but you need to find your tone, your voice, the one that works for you, and then put it into action. That's the same with Stoicism. And they even, in the discourses of Epictetus, he says the same. It's all great that you're here, listening to me and being in the classroom and reading all these books. Perfect. But if you don't do it, then it's not going to have any use. And why? So, and that's the difficult part, right? This is all very easy to say and talk about it, but at the end of the day, putting it into works, that's where that's where it really gets difficult.
I was thinking exactly the same while you were talking, that it's like, when you were mentioning that it's like we have our emotions and you just kind of like observe them and you don't act out of the emotion. I'm a yogi. I have a daily yoga practice. I meditate a lot and so on. And I was thinking about the yogic philosophy, which is like, in meditation, you observe as well your thoughts, your feelings, and so on. And you're trying to learn that you don't react in them in daily life. And you have your yoga practice and so on. So you learn more to create more space between you and all these thoughts and feelings, and like to eventually become a better person. And I was just thinking that I feel like there are certain wisdom that are just universal. And then there is like Christianity, Buddhism, like yogic philosophy, Stoicism. There are like so many different things and concepts, and they all put the same wisdom into other worlds. And we're just kind of like, one of them resonates with me, for example, and another one with you. And we're kind of like all learning the same, how to live like more purposeful, more happy, more fulfilled, be our authentic self. And through whatever resonates just the most with us. But that is always kind of like I feel like it's always the same wisdom in the end.
Yeah, me too. It's like wrapped in a different jacket that suits you, right? But I think that that's also the beauty of life, that this is our own journey, and that's how we. And I was listening to a previous episode of yours. I can't remember, but with a female entrepreneur who was in New York. I think it was. I can't remember the name, but she was. You were talking about not being saved, right? There's no one's going to come over to save me here, and I think that this is.
I think it was with Jen Morilla, yeah.
Yeah, and I like that part, because this is the same thing with philosophy and with life. We have to live this by ourselves. We have people walking with us on certain parts of our life, but at the end of the day, we are, we can, and even if you have a partner or a good friend, you can share all the things that you want with them, but they can never really get inside of your head. They can never really get like all the intricacies, because you might not even know yourself. So that's why it's really important to take up the responsibility and agency of your own life. There's so many people who kind of give it to other people, or just waiting for that one moment to make everything click and make everything work. And it's not going to happen, because you have to put it into action. And the same with what you were talking about when you were describing the yoga festival you put up, right? You have that vision, you have the action, and the third one was I can't remember it off the top of my head. You were but I wanted to, first about the vision that you were talking about. You have to have a clear idea of who you want to be. And I hear a lot about people talking about, oh, you have to be successful, you have to be this, but most people don't even know what that means to them. They're just looking at all these inspirational figures online, all these like, and coming from, and I lived in Dubai, and there you see it all the time, people with fancy cars, with the fancy watches, and with all these things. And other people's like, oh, this is what I want, this is success. If I just have this, then I'm successful. And if you really ask yourself, what does success mean? Then you will find, you don't need as much. Like, that's why I was able to, when I sold everything that I had, I've never felt so free, and I don't need anything. Like, I don't want to buy things, maybe to the extreme. Sometimes people tell me, man, buy some new clothes, buy some, and not like I look, my clothes are bad, I will obviously buy new clothes, but I just have clothes for years and years and years because they're comfortable and they're good, they serve their purpose. but it's kind of, what is enough for me. I think that is and what is the kind of life that I want to live, and who do I want to be. And I think once you kind of identify that, then success becomes a completely different concept. Because, and for me, I at one point I was driving back home from work, and I was thinking, and this was when all, the crisis hit, and my parents are getting old, and I was thinking, what am I doing? I love traveling, but I also want to be able to go to my family when I need to and when I want to. And I figured, I don't want to have to work, but I want to have the freedom of time and place to follow my passions to help other people. And I've, ever since I quit my job, and I'm, trying to build my own company as a coach, and a writer and whatever, I felt like now I've got this autonomy for myself, but I've never worked harder. I'm working pretty much every day. There's no weekend. And then I was just kind of working for someone else. So for me, identifying who you are, what is important to you are, your values, that can really steer you to the right direction, instead of just following people and just, giving your life into the hands of others and saying, oh, I need this many numbers on my bank account and then I'll be happy. And, I don't think you will. I don't think that that's going to give you happy unless you do that, that inner work, right? Again, that's in the same podcast where you were talking about. That's what people, the entrepreneurs and people who take control of their lives, that's where it starts, that inner work, doing that.
Yes, and this is like sometimes the hardest work, but then also the most numerating, like precious work, because I feel like what you get back from it once you like really shift it, and like a limiting belief, and once you see that on the outside, the change that you made on your inner world, like once that is happening, that's just a beauty and that's just priceless, I believe. And I had a question. I was thinking about when you said the concept of who you want to be. I fully agree that this is like one of the most important questions that you can ask yourself. And I believe many of us have then this idealistic version of themselves. And how can we ask ourselves that question and be who we are at the point right now, and love ourselves for who we are right now, who's not yet this compassionate, successful, caring, giving, whatever version that you want to be, but somebody who just got angry and acted up, or who just was too scared to do a certain thing, or procrastinated, like all the things that we're dealing with in daily life or our modern life. How do we manage to have this role model of who we want to be and this vision of who we want to be, and yet love ourselves for who we are, and not to shame ourselves that we're not yet there?
Yeah, I think that that's a really good question. And the two things that I kind of wanted to point to, that first, to be a bit more compassionate to ourselves. I think that that's a really good start, where you can just be a little bit kinder. We all make mistakes, and that's great. That's fine. That's how we learn. I think, that we talk about failure a lot, and just say, oh, I can't fail. But the more you think about that, the more you will do that. But if you look at it as I'm learning, this is my progress. This is my process of life. And that's where kind of stoicism for me comes in as well. It's, we are here in the now. That's the only thing that I can control. Again, the future, I don't know, but I kind of know where I want to go. And again, that comes like with having a deep sense of yourself, knowing who you are, knowing your flaws, knowing your strengths, but also being able to listen to yourself. And that's why, again, with a lot of, as you said, with yoga and meditation and with other philosophies, it's finding that little moment of quiet, of stillness, and just listening to yourself, feeling what is right or wrong. And the Stoics were big in journaling, right? There's actually saying they actually took a kind of a golden saying from a Pythagorean philosopher, where it's like, at the end of the day, write about three things that you're grateful for, three things that you've done that you could have done better, and one thing that you've done well. Kind of like reevaluating the day, and in the morning, kind of set your goals a little bit for the next day. right? I'm not good at it. I have to admit, I'm not very good at, but I do write. Like on my socials, I do write every morning, kind of, and it turned into poetry a little bit over the last 2 years, and people like it. But I do write on, like, I like the limited amount of text that you have on a post on Twitter. So I use that, and then I use an AI tool to put a little picture on there, and that's what I do every morning and every evening, and I get some nice feedback. But mainly it's for myself, right? But and then once you kind of have a more idea about who you are, I think it's letting go of that goal of reaching that point of being there, because that kind of gives us a lot of pressure. The same thing when I hear people about talking about the success, and oh, once I get there, then I'm going to be the person who I'm going to be. No, you are becoming the person right now. That little moment of success is not going to make you who you are, but the entire journey up to that moment, that's going to make you who you are. So by letting go of who you want to be at one point, remember who I am now, and I'm working towards it. And that kind of comes from, I like the biography by Bruce Lee, Be Water, My Friend. If you haven't read it, it's in a great book. I found it in the sports section, but it's in the philosophy books, and it's really nice about his life philosophy, written by his daughter. And he talks about that kind of saying, the flow of, like, okay, this is what my life is going to be, but I'm now here, and I'm just trying my best. And once we remember that, it's like, try your best in every moment that you can be. And then the next moment, if you slipped up, for example, what you said, if you become angry and you acted out of it, then the next moment, take a second, reflect on what happened, where you kind of lost it, and then maybe next time around you can use that again, right? You can use that lesson that you've learned and pause yourself a little bit faster. Or maybe that pause moment will go smaller. Like we need a longer pause. If you get angry, maybe at first you need to go for a walk for 30 minutes, but maybe next year you need 5 minutes. So that is progress, right? I think if we focus more on the progress that we make than reaching the end goal, we can find that we are going faster and more powerful towards our goal than we could ever imagine. Because sometimes we forget it, right? It's the same like if you go to the gym and you're dieting or whatever, and you're just constantly looking at the scale, and at one point you're just like, oh, this is where I want to be. But going to the gym, that'll change you in such more different ways. And this is just one simple example. I don't really go to the gym as much. I should, but I'm fine with myself, so that's fine. But I think that's a way of looking at it better. Like, what am I doing to get better? What am I working on? And you're not there. We might never be there, and that's fine. Just live in that kind of acceptance, embrace who you are now. And again, you have all the tools to deal with everything that you have coming at you right now. And don't think about, oh, I need this before I can. No, you deal with it. Just kind of look at what you have to do and do it. And I think that can help. But just focus on the progress, focus on the process, and not just reaching that goal.
Progress, not perfection. This is one of my biggest mantras that I do my best to live by. And I feel like that is so helpful to when we want to start something new, or when we like to always see, like, I feel always, which brings back the Stoic philosophy or concept of perspective. I always feel like when I connect myself with my vision and I feel like that's so far away from where I am right now, and I become in like a negative thought struggle, then like to switch the perspective and look back into where you were 5 years ago, where you were 3 years ago, where you were 10 years ago, and then to see like the journey that you already made. I feel like that's such a big shift. And there again, we have the power of perspective. And as you said as well, the moment like to focus on right now, because actually when you're so much with the version that you want to be, you're again in the future. And it was beautiful that you said again, one of the core principles of Stoicism, that focus on right now. Okay, you slipped up, maybe you got, let's say, angry. What's the best I can do in the next moment? Maybe apologize, maybe something like this. And instead of getting wrapped up in this struggle of negative thoughts and why did I and so on, which is actually then already in the past because it just happened, let's say, an hour ago, you focus on what can I do next to actually make the situation better.
Yeah, and there's a wonderful quote by Heraclitus, and Marcus Aurelius puts it in his Meditations. Again, if you haven't read the Meditations, it's a wonderful short little book, and where it's a personal journey of this Roman emperor, never meant for publication, but it's just his inner thoughts, right? It's wonderful. But he uses one quote, it kind of goes like this by Heraclitus. He says, a person can't step in the same river twice because it's no longer the same river, nor is it the same person. And that's kind of what you said with, the moment is gone, right? We have a new moment, but I'm no longer that person. I am now, that next person. And this is really big in Stoicism. It's all cause and effect, right? So the Stoics, they believe in a kind of a determinist fate, right? Where everything is already kind of determined, but we have a little sliver of free will where we can decide how we deal with it, right? What we give like assent to, what do we see as the truth, or what do we see as what is important to me, or how does it impact me? So that's kind of how we navigate it. And that's where they also say the more you accept your fate, the more you accept what's happening around you, the more peaceful and free you can be. And it sounds difficult, right? Because we have things, and this is when we talk about another key Stoic element is the preferred indifferences. Like this is and real short, like Stoicism kind of derived from the Cynics from back in the day. Zeno, he was the founder and he saw the Cynic teacher, so he went with them, and the Cynics were all on like virtue is the only good, right? That's the only thing you need to worry about, just being virtuous. And virtue is comprised in the four elements, wisdom, justice, temperance, and courage. So if you want to kind of help yourself with like what is virtue, and I can break them down in those four things. But that's what they said. And the Zeno, he went like, okay, that's really nice. But the Cynics, like literally meaning dogs, like they lived on the streets. They just, as like they were, asking for food, asking for this. They just had a cloak and a little cup, and that's what it was. And they were doing all these obscenities and all that stuff. He's like, great, but I want to help people. Let me just see if I can bring this a little bit more to the people. So he went to study with the academics and Megarians and other people. And he's like, okay, virtue is the only good, but I have things that I prefer, right? I prefer health to illness. I prefer, wealth to being poor or not having anything. I prefer, so these are the things that so that's the kind of the preferred and differences that Stoicism adds, right? So we can work towards these things that we say, this is more to my benefit. So this is kind of what I prefer. So we don't have to be as focused on all these things, but that can help us live our life as well. That can help us kind of steer to what we want to do. But at the end of the day, those are the things that we can't control, and those are on our own as well. So if you have a good job, and if you're making money and you're doing it in a moral right way, great. If you get that money from it, use it the way you want. If you want to buy that fancy car, great. If you want to do this with it, great. But don't let it control you. Right? Don't go and this is kind of the example that if you buy a fancy car and you have it sitting out the streets and you are worried at night if someone scratches it, then that car is not good for you. Why? Because it's taking you away from your peace of mind. But if you can have that car there, and if someone steals it today, great. Then it's only on loan for us, right? That's what the Stoics say. It's only on loan for us, so fine, have it as long as it doesn't own you. So I think that is also a big part of what Stoicism adds to it as well. That preferred indifferences. We can have things, we can prefer things, and even your body isn't under our control, as we said before. It's a preferred indifference to be healthy. But if it's not, then then we just have to accept that little moment, the moment of now again, and deal. And this is the situation. I had a car, and now I don't. So I'll get a new one. And so yeah.
And understand that we are worthy with or without the car, no matter what the body is like, and to understand that our worth is completely untied from anything on the outside. And I think that's why people are very often so like attached to the car, to the money, to the success, whatever it is, because our self worth is getting tied with it. And to understand these things are all amazing to have, and if they're not yet, I'm endlessly worthy.
And yeah, just real, because that's also when we are putting our worth on the opinions of others. Again, something that's out of our control. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the times when we need to show, like I said, like I don't really worry about the fancy things, but in a certain way you do. You want to kind of look presentable. You want to see that, and first that's for me as well. You want to take care of yourself. But if you and you know, the example is from Dubai is great, because there it's just everybody just wants to show flashy things. And you know, I see a lot of the times when people ride the flashier cars, they don't have, you know, the money to back it up, right? They're usually in debt or have loans and all that stuff. They just want to show, like, look at me. But they're doing it for other people's opinions, not for themselves. Because again, if you really ask yourself what would make me truly happy without thinking about what anyone else would think about me, then you don't need as much, you know. And I've traveled a lot around the world, which is great, and people live different lives, but at the core, people want the same. They want to have a good life for themselves and for the people that they love, and you don't need as much for that. You know, you really don't. And I've had people, as I coach them, say like, oh, I want to help this person this way, help this person that way. And as I have, you asked what this person needs, because you are filling in the blanks for them. And it's like, oh yeah, oh, maybe you don't need to do as much as you do. Maybe just being there, you know. And again, you know, I think that is, we can give so much more in a far more valuable way than just throwing money at it. And I think that's where money is a tool. Money is important, right? I mean, not like, I also work for money and we need it to live, but I've realized that I don't need as much as I thought I needed at the beginning. I just need enough. I just need, you know, something to kind of, you know, pay for my food and, you know, the things that I like to do, the travels, and give me that sense of freedom, and that's it. I don't need to be a multimillionaire or whatever. If it happens, great. But if it doesn't, I'll find ways to make money, and hopefully I can help people in the process as well.
You mentioned before that you sold everything, and we're just talking about materialistic goods and how we're attached to them. How did it impact you to sell everything and start traveling and to kind of like free yourself from all your possessions?
So I think I've already had this in myself for a long time. Like I said, I don't really need much. When I went on this kind of more materialistic way, it was more for like other people, I felt, you know. So at one point when I was working in Dubai, I already had a plan of like, I'm gonna work towards it. I already had like a, you know, and you mentioned that in that other podcast episode of yours where you talked about your, you know, the festival, the yoga festival, which was a great story, by the way. I loved listening to that. And
Thank you.
but I had this vision, right? And I had this kind of idea of like, what does my life is going to look like? What do I want? And one of the greatest examples of this is like, I lived in Dubai for 5 years, and I had a rental car all that time. And every year I was like, oh, should I buy a car? And I asked my friends, like, yeah, you know, you're living here, it doesn't make sense to rent, right? But for me, the car was kind of a symbol, because I just wanted to be able to, you know, just pack my suitcases, drive to the airport, give off the key, and leave, right? And walk into that plane. And that's pretty much, at the end of the day, that's what I did. So for me, when I sold everything, it was just felt like, you know, all this weight fell off. Like I said, everything. Well, I've got, you know, books at my parents' place. I've got like 3 suits, you know. But even if there's things in my backpack where to go, I'll just buy new stuff. You know, that's fine. I've got, you know, got a couple of books that I carry with me, you know, the Stoic books, because I like to just have them with me, and also for the writing that I do as a good reference. But for me, just giving up everything and leaving everything just meant like, you know, what do I value most in my life? And that's my time. You know, that's just, you know, and there's a really nice, and I'm, you know, throwing maybe some book references out here, but there's a really nice book from Vicky Robin, and it's, the title is Your Money or Your Life, where, you know, she calculates, you know, what time do you have to spend to buy all the things that you need. So she literally calculates, okay, you wake up in the morning, you have to prepare yourself to go to work for this much time. You go to work, then you come back, you have to do all these things. So it's not calculating the stuff, how much it costs in money, but how much it costs in your time. And then bringing it back to a quote from Seneca from the Stoics, he writes, and Seneca was one of the wealthiest, most influential people in his time, right? He was the advisor of Nero, the emperor. He was his tutor, so he was kind of a controversial type, but that's a different conversation. He had a quote which is really great. He says, you know, we are so stingy and so careful with giving stuff away, you know, like our money or possessions, you know. Oh, you want to borrow $5? No, I'm not sure. You know, oh, you want to, you know, get my car? No, not really. But when it comes to time, we just give it away, right? Oh, you want 5 minutes? Yeah, here you go. Oh, you want 10 minutes, an hour? And he says, you know, but time is the only commodity we can never get back. And we don't even know how much we have of it. So, you know, and that's kind of the idea that really changed my life. So I looked around myself, And at one point I was living in a one bedroom apartment, and then I moved to a studio in Dubai. I was like, you know what, I'm going to just save all the money I can. And I was making decent amount. I was an English teacher there. I was making, decent amount of money. uh, yeah, for Dubai principles, maybe not as much, but for me it was perfect, right? It was good. I lived in a small studio. I rented a car. I didn't do much. At one point, I just went to work. I read a lot of books. I did my writing and my working, and I managed to save it. I'm still kind of living off those savings right now. This has bought me almost 2 years of doing what I want to do. And then obviously, at one point the money is going to going to go down the more if you don't really work and get a lot of income. But that's slowly coming, right? That's slowly building, so that's great. But I think that that's really where it gave me all that. That's for me the one thing that selling everything bought me time. And that's the most precious thing in life that we have. And also one of the things that we have to be grateful for to really spend it the way we want to do. And that doesn't mean that we can't binge watch something, right? But if we do, just tell yourself, you know what, I'm just gonna binge watch a series and do it. And don't feel bad about it. Don't feel like, oh no, this is what you needed to do right now, so do it. Don't feel, worried about it. Or if you don't want to do anything, don't, because we read all these influencers, all these motivational speakers. You've got to be active all the time. You've got to go to the gym at 5 a.m. or you've got to do this. No, do what feels good for you. And at the one point, if you really do that, you will start doing the things that you must, right? If you have that vision of yourself, those other things that you said, like, this is what I want to be, this is who I want to be, and this is where I want to go to. At one point, you will take over and start doing those things naturally.
Thank you for sharing. You mentioned before that Stoicism can help us to live a more purposeful life. How can we, through a Stoic perspective, how can we find our purpose? Because I know so many people who are listening, so many people I'm talking to, so many clients, they're searching for their purpose, and they're kind of like feeling, or many have the feeling that their life is a little bit without purpose, and that leads for many also, I think, to depression and to like a sense of emptiness. So how can a Stoic perspective help us to discover our purpose?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I get that a lot, and I've asked myself that many times, right? Like, oh, what is my purpose in life? And throughout these conversations that I have on my the podcast that I host as well with my close friend Bryce is on there, but we've held these spaces many times, and at one point he mentioned something really kind of impactful. And I don't know why he came up with it, but he said, "You want a purpose in life? Just be a good person. Start with that." Just being the best version of yourself. And don't think about a purpose in a sense of, I want to be this, or I want to have this label behind my name, or I wanted people to look at me like this way. No, just be a good person. And Marcus Aurelius says, in like one of his quotes, stop talking about what a good person is and go be one, right? Put it into action. And I think for me, that is, if you are really lost in, what kind of purpose you want to have and how you want to live your life, just look at it again, at your daily life, and how can I be the best version of myself, and how can I do this in the right action? That's where Stoicism has this sense of virtue. Virtue is the only good, living in accordance with nature. Those are pretty much the two basic principles, right? But when we do that, we can find that purpose will meet us, right? We don't have to, because the more you look at it, it's the same kind of, when you compare it to looking for a partner. Some people are just looking for the perfect partner. It's like, oh, I need to have a relationship. I need to have this partner. But once you start building your own life and not look at that, the person will come in your way, or you will, your paths will cross because you are doing what you like, and someone like-minded will walk to you. And I think the same thing with purpose. And we might never know what a purpose is, but maybe the people that we touched with our lives, they might have felt it, right? And one quick example again, like as a teacher, I've taught many, young kids from 3 years old to like adults, and you never know what they might learn from you. Maybe it's the language that you're teaching, or maybe just some kind of thing in life. Maybe it's just kind of a way of living. And that's, for me, is the best way to kind of find that purpose, by just letting it go. You want a purpose in life? Follow your passions. Be good. That there's just listen to yourself. I think that's where we can be the most purposeful for ourselves. And then what, again, if the book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, he's like, and because we try to make our life so smooth without any obstacles, right? We just like, oh, the obstacles, that's kind of where we I don't want to have any obstacles. And the Stoics say, yes, no, well, it's not that you want them, but they will happen. And they will happen, and they will help you be a better version, because those obstacles will help you to really put all the things that we're studying and learning to the test. And Viktor Frankl says, and that's where we can find our meaning, in that involuntary struggle, right? And he makes a very big distinction between voluntary obstacles and involuntary ones. But in those involuntary ones, and he survived, I can't remember what, but he survived the concentration camps, and in that moment, he was kind of developing his therapies, logotherapy, that he wanted to, because he felt that is what I really need to give people in my life. That is kind of my value add. And that helped him going, right? That kind of sense of like, this is what my passion is, this is who I'm supposed to be. And he found it through the struggles, right? And that's where we can find our meaning. So people who say like, oh, I want my life to go smooth, yeah, great, but it's not gonna be that way. We're gonna, and I always say, the smoother your life goes, the faster you can trip over a pebble, because then that is the mountain that you can't climb, right? If you're just walking, slipping on the street, then that smallest little thing that will have you stumble. And if you deal with bigger obstacles in the right way, then at one point there's not going to be an obstacle, because you don't see them as such anymore. So, and before I pass it back, is one, and I'm throwing a lot of quotes out there because I love them, but one of my favorite quotes from Epictetus, he says, don't wish for your life to happen don't want your life to happen as you wish, but want it to happen as it does, and your life will go smoothly, right? So if you say, I want no obstacles in my life, well, if that's what you want, then you're going to have, every obstacle is going to frustrate you, annoy you, give you anxiety for what might come. But if you learn to accept it as it comes, then your life will go smoothly, because then you're just like, okay, whatever comes my way, if it's good or if it's bad, and the Stoics don't believe that there's good or bad. They just say it just happens, and I make that label. I add like it's good or bad. That's my judgment of it. So I am throwing much out there, but that's kind of, when people ask me like, what is my purpose? I just like, live. Be a good person, live. That's your first purpose right now. And then if you want to put a label to it, you will find your way. But kind of, take it easy on yourself. But yeah.
Yeah, I believe we have multiple purposes, and I think they can also develop over time. And I believe like we have a purpose as a family member, and we have a purpose in our business career, and we have a purpose as husband, as wife. So I believe there like many different kind of like role and purposes that we do have. And I find it beautiful to sum it up with just be the best person that you can be, because that's basically like, this is like bringing us back to know your vision about who you want to be and try your best to become that person.
Yeah.
And accept whatever is encountering on that journey, and accept that all those things and obstacles will make you to that person that you're striving to be, because that person is mostly resilient and strong, and like can handle challenges well. And so we need to go through these obstacles.
Yeah, and that also makes it easier for us, right? As you said, you break down the roles, the purposes that you have, because then you just ask yourself, okay, what am I doing now? I'm just being, a good brother, sister, father, a mother, whatever. And I just, okay, this is what I need to do right now, right? This is just like, okay, let's be the best teacher in my sense. Okay, I'm just in this classroom. I don't have to focus on anything else. This is what, so you make it easier for yourself because you break it down. You just instead of putting everything in one go, no, just make it smaller.
Yeah. Benny, thank you so much for your time and sharing all your wisdom. It's truly amazing to see how many books you read, how much knowledge you gathered, and to also see like what it can mean if you're like applying all these philosophies to your life, and what kind of safety and security and guidelines it can give us in this roller coaster called life if we have a philosophy. And it can be the Stoic one, it can be like we can take a few things from that concept, a few things from a different thing, kind of like make our own philosophy. But to have these guidelines help us to become the person that we want to be. So thank you so much for your time. It was truly a pleasure to talk to you, and I wish you all the best with building your business and on your travel journey.
Yeah, and thank you for having me here. It was a great experience, and I really enjoyed conversation with you, and listening to all the other episodes and interviews that you have, because it's also very inspiring. So No, thank you very much, and I wish you the same. Good luck with your travels and with all the endeavors and the things that you do. But thanks for having me on and giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I would love to connect with you on a more personal level on Instagram at @HannahWiz_, where you will receive daily inspiration and more insights on how you can turn your dreams into reality. If you want to dive even deeper into becoming your higher self and you would like my support, check out my website hannahwiz.com. Be sure you're subscribed to my podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And if you like this show, share it with someone who is looking to live an extraordinary life. Thank you so much for being part of this beautiful community. I am sending you so much love and a big, big hug. And always remember, it's time to shine your light.